thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you for the invitation to come to see you. It is always both nice and complicated to present to such an audience as yours. It is nice and also simple because we speak the same language, and out of all the groups who are called stakeholders or participants, interested parties of the Eastern governance process, we speak the same language. You've got undoubtedly the highest qualification for that. And that's not flattery, that's really true. But on the other side, it's also complicated because I always feel that there is something phony about it, because it is very hard to mistreat you. That's why please be kind to me if I make mistakes in technical terms. And I will be thankful for any questions that may arise with you. It's always, and I'm almost the last presenter, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. And my goal is not to surprise you with something new, but to draw your attention to what our organization is doing, the ICANN Corporation, and to instigate to get involved in our activities. This is a famous picture that many of you probably have seen, which describes what occurs in the field of internet governance. Where's the role of ICANN here? What we do. But from afar, it is hard to see, but it's not also the theory, because you will see this on the webpage. You will be able to download this, and you'll be able to enjoy the picture after the conference when you download the presentation. But what I would like to stress, here you can see the areas with which ICANN deals with, from this huge infrastructural behemoth that we deal with. There was always this triad: security, stability, safety, and resiliency. But recently we have a new graph, new box, which is called interoperability. So what's so different about this thing? But this is still not a multilateral thing. This is what ICANN does in general. The multilateral or multi-level, multi-layer model looks like this. From the theoretical standpoint, the 7-level idea of the open systems, everything was supposed to be much more, even more complicated. From the standpoint of the National Union of Electric Communication, which would cover everything by 4 layers, which would make it a bit simpler. But for the goals, which would be satisfactory to explain the idea of the internet governance. But it's probably then it will be probably better to even limit yourself to 3 layers. Obviously, that in the very lowest, the physical level, these are channels, the channels of communication, it's the equipment, etc. Then upper, we see what is called the logical level, the network level, which unites the entire versatility of devices into the single system, into a single network. It's in yellow, and it's easy to mention that ICANN and other organizations that provide services and are presented in this room are belonging to this yellow part. And then the upper part in blue is the applied level. This is everything that internet is rich with, and which everybody will love to regulate. But since there's a lack of knowledge and expertise, they always go 1 or 2 layers lower to regulate something even better, because for the upper level they don't have enough expertise. I would like to draw attention to the list of those who read to the thing called government actors, the upper right column. In Russian we call them key players, key subjects. And it is interesting that on all the 3 levels they don't meet, they don't comply. These sets of actors don't apply. If we take the public agencies in the lower, anyway, you'll see. In the very low, in the lowest angle, you see the Ministry of Communication, the Administration of Communication, that is in charge of the development of the communication infrastructure. But on our logical level, the mid-level, the governmental support is not foreseen by the reality, and another level from the state of applications we see on the upper level. But this is really kind of a political management and law enforcement agencies. So if we have a more attentive look, then we see quite a clear distribution of who is responsible for what. But on this slide, in order not to overcomplicate, there is one missing column, another missing element, which would say that which would say what are the goals for the governance and the forms within which this governance is expressed. For the lawyers, these are the bills and drafts of bills. For the technical experts and the experts in the field of standards, this is usually called the technical regulations. But as we all understand, in the very internet, there is one additional thing. There is that some not immaterial type of object to make the governance effective, which is necessary to make the governance effective, to make it the way it is. And on the next slide, our logical level is reflected in more details, more accurately, with listing all the agencies, including ICANN Sayani, and in the very key middle, we see such agencies as RIPE NCC, all those who are the users and operators linked with the IP addressing. And immediately you can tell that this process, it's not a single ranking, it's not linear, it's not simple. And in this context, apart from simple listing of documents and who takes them to who, reads and adopts, as I already mentioned, it is also important to consider such a factor, such a dimension, which is called trust. Apart from the cooperation and elaboration of certain policies, standards and documents, it is also important to remember that all the stakeholders trust each other, should trust each other, and not accidentally, more and more often, when we speak of the informational security, even on the intergovernmental or international levels, well, generally speaking, everything that regards the practical steps in this field is limited only to certain trust-building measures. Not certain conventions, not certain international agreements, but just the drafting of respective confidence-building measures which just help to better understand each other. Which theoretical conclusions can one infer? What we should remember against that? Firstly, as I mentioned, at different levels there are different participants, and here we have the representatives of the agencies from various layers, and it's cool that there is the mail.ru representative who clearly understands how this internet thing works. It is cool that the ICANN is also engaged in the discussion of issues. It would be also nice that if this could be understood by the regulatory bodies, in order to avoid mistakes in their work. Secondly, we see the new dimensions in the governance, internet governance. What's safety, stability, and resiliency? It's more or less clear for everyone. What are these standards for? In the widest meaning, the interoperability term is gaining usage, and as to the domain space, as to what the colleagues do from the IDNs, it's the universal acceptance issue. It's a complicated issue, but it also, theoretically, it's the interoperability question. But this is the answer to which you must answer. But as regards the trust issue, the trust to each other in this entire process, it's not an issue, it's the evidence. It's an obvious thing which we all should deal with. Another conclusion, another theoretical inference, it regards the necessity to have various types of regulatory documents, even like so-called documents, I can say. And here, the meaning, apart from the set of papers and standards in electronic or paper form, the big meaning is given to the personal communication, personal trust, the personal context, and a conference like this one and today and tomorrow's is a beautiful opportunity to set such mutual trust and confidence. It's a very important side of the work when we speak of the effective internet governance. And another one, the last one, is when we speak of the attempts of regulating, the mixture of layers takes place when one tries to speak of his doing some great solutions to make everyone be happy, to limit the access to information of the antisocial nature. Eventually, we see the extreme politicization of the process. We add unnecessary politics without gaining the expected result. When in Russia the quoting of Anna Karenina was forbidden because it's a suicide and this can cause certain wrong associations with the juveniles, the means of achieving this result, it was the blockage of the IPs and DNSs. And there's a Kaspersky laboratory mentioned a longer time ago, a couple of years ago. It also led to the lowering of the average age of entering into the cyber crime, which is now 13 years old. So the child tries to read, let's say, the home task from school on the Karenina, but since it's forbidden, he can't find it. But in this process, if he sees the opportunity, if you install this software, you will get some money and see the Anna Karenina, and then then the perspective, it's obvious. And so, unfortunately, such solutions are harmful, and we must avoid them. On the other side, what Pericles also warned us about, we have these words in the redaction of Bismarck in our office, which says that just because you do not take an interest in politics, it doesn't mean that politics won't take an interest in you. And unfortunately, this is the objective reality with which one must understand. What are the practical implications or recommendations from all these theoretical speculations one can make? Well, it's utterly obvious that the multi-layer, maybe not that simple, but the one that is presented more correct to you model, this multi-layer nature of the internet governance should always be taken into consideration. The issue is how to make internet safer, how to regulate internet, how to provide for greater safety of internet are the totally empty and senseless questions if one does not indicate to which layer of responsibility one is addressing this question. On the other side, it demands from all of us the permanent participation in the process of information sharing, in the attempt to open the eyes of our colleagues as to this problem, because better than you and me, no one else can do it. And this process must be permanent, not only during such conferences, but also in every communication with every representative of the public agency, government agency, or any other organization that believes that they are involved in the internet governance. Another conclusion that demands some practical implementation, that currently one must be ready to excessive politicization. Even today here we heard some examples. Well, I can usually receive the question, which is not based on real facts, why Americans some time ago switched off the Libyan or Syrian domains. This never happened, but such questions, why RapidC recognizes the Donetsk Republic recognizes as the part of Russia. And to answer to this, well, RapidC behaved absolutely correctly. But in the future, when we had to solve the situation, then unfortunately such problems will probably also appear in the future as well. Why I can switched off the Crimean domains? Why the American government introduced sanctions, and respectively, something happened to the Crimean domain investors? Well, unfortunately, this is the situation. which is directly, unfortunately, linked to the misunderstanding of the multi-layer structure, or with its with its ignoring, or another change of the regulations. In the last 10 years, all the non-technical experts gained the understanding and arguments of what is the transborder nature of Internet. That Internet is not just simply an American system, it's not part of the infrastructure of the economy of the US, and the Internet can't be locked out within some national boundaries. And so now we also must understand what to do in the field of trust between all the stakeholders of the governance process. And the last one, which is being actively discussed by the experts in the field of information security, is that we see what is happening now in the field of internet governance. So that one must consider the threat as a risk factor, such things as cyber attacks or cyber crime, which is quite sad. But the massive aftermath of the unsound decisions in the field of governance leads to the same type of aftermath as the cyber attacks, etc. They are as harmful as the others. On this slide you can see the contact information as to one can get the additional information. As of today, the Twitter in Russian language continues work. Everyone please participate in this and listen, read and actively participate. Thank you for your attention.